All right. I guess we can start. So hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Corbicula, Fluminea, Arise in New Zealand, first record perspective and impacts. My name is Sebastian, and I'm honored to be your host today on behalf of INVASIVSNET, the International Association of Open Knowledge on invasive alien species, in collaboration with the GuardIAS project, funded by the European Union's Horizon Europe program. InvasiveNet is a nonprofit and non-governmental organization dedicated to fostering open, high-quality knowledge exchange on invasive species. Our mission is to build a global, sustainable network that connects researchers, practitioners, and stakeholders working towards a better understanding and management of biological invasions. Today's event is part of the GuardIAS InvasiveNet webinar series, which brings together leading scientists and practitioners to share emerging research, management, experiences, and perspectives on aquatic biosecurity across the world. These sessions focuses on a significant and timely discovery, the first record of the golden clam, Corbicula fluminea, in New Zealand, and explores what this means for freshwater biosecurity, ecosystem impacts, and management responses. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Dr. Deborah Hofstra. She is a specialist in freshwater biosecurity at the New Zealand Institute for Earth Science, with expertise in aquatic plant management, invasive species control, and native restoration. Our second speaker is Medikara Annie Warrington. She's a researcher at the University of Otago, working in biosecurity solutions that center Te Ao Maori Tikanga and Matarunga, sorry if I mispronounced it, to investigate and prevent the spread of golden clams and other aquatic invaders across this area. So with further ado, let's begin. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Dr. Deborah Hofstra. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that you can see my, and I feel like I need a thumbs up to confirm that you can see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, good. Thank you. So thank you for that lovely introduction. Gives me much pleasure to be here tonight on our time and to talk to you all about Corbicula fluminea, which has just arrived in New Zealand recently. And so we're going to share some of the information about the first record, perspectives, and the impacts that we're seeing already. Oh, and that's the first issue because my slides aren't moving on. One moment, I'm going to stop sharing and start and see if I can make that start again. All right, so hopefully this time it's now working again. So I guess one of the first things that we've found since the clam was identified in 2023, it was found at an area called Lake Karapiro, which is actually a hydro lake within one of the largest river systems in New Zealand. So that's the Waikato River, and that's in the North Island of New Zealand for people who are familiar with the country. The threats of the invasive species, Corbicula, was well recognised in terms of the potential for impacts on ecology, culture, social and economic scales as well. So the government agency that was the lead in terms of the responsibilities for dealing with Corbicula was the Ministry for Primary Industries, and you'll see me refer to them as MPI. So one of the first things that they did was in the first few weeks of the clam being identified is coordinated a delimiting study, and that was something that the organisation I work for undertook. And from that, we discerned that it was actually present in another lake as well. So to give you an indication of what that looks like in terms of timeline, it was first identified in May 2023 at that place called Bob's Landing on Lake Karapiro. There was, within the first month after that, there was a delimiting study, and that's when we also realised that it was actually further in that same Waikato River system, so a place called Lake Maraetai, and downstream all the way to the port, so Port Waikato. Since then, there's also been another survey, but this was a year later, and this one is the first survey that was a dive survey. So what this told us is actually something about the depth distribution in those lakes of the clam. The other things that the Ministry for Primary Industries did is they also established a technical advisory group, and really the focus was particularly on containment, so trying to keep the clam within that region that it had first been identified and found. To do this, they did a couple of different things. One of them was using a piece of legislation called the Biosecurity Act and declaring the clam an unwanted organism. So this meant that people weren't allowed to collect it, possess it, move it, or do anything with it in any way as part of that measure to make sure that it wasn't used or moved. And the second thing was implementing the use of a controlled area notice. So what this does, and these are still in place, is they restrict the movement of boats from the areas where the clam is. So for example, if somebody's using a boat for water sports on Lake Maraetai, they can't be using that boat anywhere else. So part of this was all focusing then on reducing the risk of spread by containing the movement of those vessels. There was a lot of public information that was also produced, so campaigns in media and social media to inform people about what the clam was and what the problems associated with it could be. And really a renewed look at check, clean, dry. So the messaging around check, clean, dry is something that has been used in other invasive species and biosecurity campaigns, and it's really just encouraging the people, the members of the public, to, when they've been in a water body, to check that they haven't got any obvious clams on their boat or in amongst any of their gear, that it is clean and that gear is dried. The thing that has most recently been worked on is a surveillance plan that is being developed by that same agency. So this just really comes back then to the question of the perspectives and what is the concern. So why is everybody concerned about this invasive clam in a New Zealand context? We know that there are likely to be potential impacts in terms of aquatic ecology, and one of the main concerns was the competition with our native filter feeders. So we have a native freshwater mussel, also known as kākahi. So the concern about whether or not there would be competition with that species. We know, of course, from the literature and from experiences in other countries that clogging of water pipes and infrastructure can be an issue. And fundamentally, there was also a lot of concern about the way that we enjoy our lakes and interact with our waterways. So, for example, would sandy lake beaches become covered in clamshells? So there were a lot of things that people were concerned about in that space. And this particular slide here just gives you an example of how challenging things can be when that's what people are concerned about. Because when you think about the clams, you might think about the adult clams and the fact that they can be a couple of centimetres in size. But the slide here shows you that there are fully formed clams that are very, very small. And these, of course, are the real challenge in terms of being able to keep any gear clean and be able to make sure that you're not running the risk of inadvertently moving clams of this size between one location and another. And now I'm just going to pass over to Merikara, who's going to explore a little bit more on those perspectives and concerns.
Thank you, Deb. So just as a Indigenous member from one of the many river iwi or tribes that have an ancestral connection to the entire water body. So my tribe, Ngāti Kuriki Kahukura, one of the reasons why we obviously been quite concerned is the area that they were initially found, as Deb has spoke about, is right in our, ancestral kind of settlement area, and where we have quite a lot of cultural significance in. So for us, some of the main concerns have been about the mauri, so the essence or life force of the awa and the flora and fauna that live within it. So the health and well-being, what impacts are these invasive clams going to have on how the river looks, smells, feels, tastes and sounds. And then next we have our whanaungatanga, so the kinship relationship. So how do we as Indigenous peoples, as well as Deborah already touched on, how are we then interacting with the river and maintaining that ancestral connection, as we view the waterway as a tupuna, an ancestor that we have a close kinship relationship to. Followed by, so kind of following on from that, is this concept of kaitiakitanga, so a stewardship or guardianship. So we believe, so ko o te awa, ko te awa ko o, so I am the river is me. And so because we have that kinship relationship, we also have this reciprocal caretaker obligation between us as Indigenous people and the river and all that lives in it. So how will these clams affect how we can practice and do the river justice in being able to enact that kaitiakitanga ship? Yeah. Next, please, Deb. And then, lastly was another thing that, has been of concern is so kotahitanga, so the unity or collective action. So yes, for us, obviously the river has no boundary lines. It is one body of water, and so we have many river tribes that connect to this river up and down, as you saw through the map. So how can we, as an Indigenous people, but very unique, autonomous, smaller tribes and communities, how do we come together to make collective decisions for the best, for the well-being of our waterways and all that live in there? And as I said, we each have our own unique challenges and unique water bodies that we, I guess, have specific connections to along that main water body of the Waikato River. So exactly for us, Ngāti Kuriki Kahukura, ours is very much that containment and eradication of this clams. Where is obviously further up, especially for those areas where there has yet to be any clams detected. Obviously there's this very much a preventative measures they want to take. They do not want this clam in their areas. So how can we all work together to make sure that we're all helping each other get rid of this invasive species? Thanks, Deb. So here are just some of the many articles kind of that came out in terms of the clams there. It seems to be it's well established there, and exactly just the differing kind of thoughts and actions that various river iwi want to take.
Thank you. So this, of course, brings us to the genesis of our research program. There were essentially three very broad areas of work that were needed. So there was recognition about the concerns and the potential impacts, particularly on native species, so taonga species. We knew that there were limited control methods, and we needed to better predict where the locations were that were most at risk. So as Merikara touched on, there are some river iwi who are already impacted by the clam's presence, but there are others for whom the clam isn't in their waters. So we really do want to do a better job of being able to prioritise surveillance and detection, because of course it's when you have you can detect things early, you have that better opportunity to actually do something about it. So those three areas then became the theme of, or the themes of, the research program. So I'm just going to touch a little bit now on impacts, and this slide just visually really provides the context for the different things that we're seeing. So you can see examples on the left-hand side where we have sandy substrates, only the clam siphons are really visible, right through to the right-hand side where it's quite gravelly substrates. The clams are quite visible on the top of those substrates, and we also have them occupying habitats and amongst invasive, or what for us is an invasive weed, which is Ceratophyllum demersum. So we're already seeing that they're across a wide range of different habitats within the river. We wanted to understand more about the changes in the populations of Corbicula and our native mussels over time. So we have surveys which have been undertaken twice now in those two lakes, Lakes Maraetai and Karapiro. And we've used divers to do these surveys so that we can get a better understanding of what's actually happening at different water depths and compare those across time. This slide here really gives you an example of what we're looking at. So for every transect that we've looked at in those different lakes, or rather every site, we have 3 different profiles. And on those different profiles, we have divers taking quadrat samples at different water depths, as well as core samples to get us a deeper sediment volume, and water samples and addressing the habitat. Where it's at 15 metres, it's actually dark, and so the divers can't see anymore, so they actually take a scoop net type of sample instead. As you can imagine, this means we have a lot of samples. So what we have been doing, so our team at Earth Sciences, along with Rokawa at Lake Maraetai and Ngāti Koroki Kahukura at Lake Karapiro, the teams have come together to sort through all of these samples, removing the clams, removing the native kakahi, measuring them all and counting them, so that we can start to gather that data on what the relative abundance of the 2 different species are in these lakes at those different water depths. And this just is an example of what we've seen. So the Corbicula, the invasive species on the left, the native kakahi on the right. And what I want you to take away from this slide is essentially, if you look at those water depths, which are down on the horizontal axis, you can see that we have abundant kakahi and abundant Corbicula at those 12 to 15 metre water depths. So in the first instance, that appears to be quite concerning. In other words, there could likely be competition for habitat because they're occupying the same depth distribution. But what I also want to draw your attention to is the vertical axis. So you can see that essentially there are 10 times the numbers of Corbicula than there are of kakahi. There's more work to be done in this space. Obviously, this is just based on 2 surveys, so we do want to keep monitoring this, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other work. This data, by the way, all these graphs are available on our website. Some of the other work that we've been doing is the team have just completed a survey. So this really was just about public awareness. We know that there has been a public awareness campaign by the lead agency. So we're really wanting to understand, do people know what the issues with the clam are, and are they already experiencing impacts? And you can see there that more than 50% of the people who are answering that survey had already noticed some impacts, and there were already some increased costs and time associated with some of their activities with those lakes. This is a new piece of data which a colleague of ours, Adam Hartland, at a different institute, has just shared with us. So this really is asking the question of whether or not calcium levels are also changing in the lake waters. So what you see here are 2 graphs. The one on the left has got a blue line and a green line. The blue line is a site in Lake Karapiro that's near the inflow to the lake, and the green line on that graph is below Lake Karapiro. So what you can see there is that there's a difference between those 2. So in other words, there's more calcium at the top of the lake than there is at the end of when the water comes out of the lake. And we see a similar kind of information in the graph on the left, where it's just taken samples from in Lake Karapiro itself, but at different water depths. So the blue line is the top, the orange is the middle, and the red is at depth. And we also see that there is a trend in these 2 graphs where there's been a decline in those calcium levels in December 2024, so that's our summer, right through until about May 2025. So the question that was raised is, does the decline in the calcium levels actually relate to the intense growth period of the Corbicula in the lake? We're just starting to work out this data and to link it up with our abundance data, but it certainly looks like it is, because the other thing I want to draw your attention to on these graphs is that grey band, horizontal band that you see through the middle. That's the range of calcium levels that have been found in the previous couple of decades. So what you can also tell is that the decline that was seen over the summer is well below the previous range in calcium levels. Obviously, this raises questions about whether or not how much calcium remains available and whether or not the availability of calcium is going to, again, impact on our native Tonga species that would also be using calcium for their shells. So that's some of the aquatic ecology impacts that we've seen. We also need to bear in mind that we're seeing impacts on recreational users. So one of the mechanisms to reduce the spread outside of the region has been to restrict boat movement. Of course, that doesn't mean that everybody's happy with those restrictions. So there's also been a lot of work that's going on in terms of the science around check, clean, dry, and how we can all collectively better make sure that our gear is clean. And this includes, for us as a research organisation, those same boat restrictions also apply. So our team has set about doing a bunch of things, and if you look at the bottom, there is a website, so that information is accessible. And some of the work that we've been doing has just really been quite simple studies to understand better what the temperature thresholds are. So, for example, water between 50 and 55 degrees for 5 minutes, that's enough to kill those really small clams. Because remembering it's those small things that you can't really see that actually are the greatest risk of transfer between sites. And you'll see there's a number of other quite simple and accessible mechanisms or methods there that can be used for decontaminating equipment. As you can imagine, there has been quite a public response to this invasive species. And one of the questions that we got a lot is how can we tell the clam from a native kakahi, particularly when these are really small. So we have developed this ID guide to help not just other agencies, but also members of the public who want to become or are already engaged, especially in citizen science type of activities. And specifically, one of the important things that's in that guide is what you can see here on this slide, which essentially shows, particularly when they're small, what people need to be looking for and the difference between a native kakahi, that obviously what you want to keep. So that's the one on the bottom left, quite a distinct shape, much more oblong compared with our native spherid. So we do have a native pea clam, which doesn't grow very big, but thankfully it's also a very different colour to the invasive clam. So just trying to help members of the public be able to distinguish between these different things so we don't have people feeling alarmed when they find a native mussel, rather they can just rejoice that they found a native mussel. So I guess I want to just touch a little bit on what's next. We have got filtration studies underway, so really comparing, is there going to be direct competition between the invasive species and our native kakahi for actually the food items, so what they're filtering out of the water as opposed to what they're rejecting in pseudo-feces or feces. We've got economic forecasting underway. We definitely need more intervention tools to manage the clams, and as I mentioned, the understanding more about the dispersal and the surveillance methods, and really getting to work on what the iwi-led research priorities are. And Medicut is going to talk to that now.
Great, thank you, Deb. So through the funding and research program through NIWA Earth Sciences NZ now, we've been able to establish a kahui. So this is where we have representatives from many of the river iwi that we all come together and essentially, we discuss, strategize, plan where we would like to take lead in certain research priorities. So as I mentioned earlier, where I am, Ngāti Kuriki Kahukura, within that Lake Karapiro, we're very much about the containment and eradication, as the clams are already there. Whereas, yes, some of the other river iwis are definitely wanting the prevention, absolutely do not want them. So we all kind of get together and discuss what we all like to do. And so some of the kind of initial thoughts in our first meeting as a kāhui kind of really touched on our mōhiotanga or mātauranga, so that is our traditional knowledge systems, and so that was how we can use our traditional knowledge systems in a new adaptive and innovative way alongside Western science. So for us, we have our rongoa, so that's our traditional herbal treatments or medicine, so from a lot of our native flora. How can we use that knowledge and other techniques, so like the whakawetu or karuku is a type of fern bundle, so usually used for capturing koura, so our native crayfish, but how can we use these techniques or methods that we already have kind of in parallel alongside Western science? So definitely very much in support of a lot of this research-based research in terms of what the clams are doing, where they are, what are they eating, where can you find them? So yeah, really kind of tapping into those two knowledge streams really, and just maximizing and making the best. Followed by, so again, I guess next is the technology and training. So yes, a lot of our mana whenua, because they interact with the water body a lot, they're quite on the ground. So how can we upskill the people that are out there seeing, interacting with the body of water, to essentially just add more hands on the ground to just help with the load of work. So technology that was mentioned is the eDNA, rat tests, kick nets, and so yeah, essentially being able to allow us to also do the work for us to enact our mana motuhake or Indigenous sovereignty or autonomy. But our most immediate concern at the moment is the Alva Trap and Transfer program. So yeah, recently our River iwi came together to create a Waikato and Waipa River iwi collective that took over the contract of from a commercial fisherman, so our dam captures alvas, so the young juvenile eels, our native eels, our tuna, which is a tonga species and very much a revered food source, especially in that area of the river. So they trap them at the dam, and they then take the alvas and release them into other water bodies that, because of the dam being a barrier, they can't get to. So since the discovery of the clam, that work has had to be paused, as there was a very big concern that we didn't want any of the clam larvae attaching to the tuna or being in the water and then being transferred and spreading to other places. So so it's been a few years since alvas have been moved. So we're definitely really keen to look for a solution so that can start up again. So with NIWA, looking at things like the UV treatments, putting in some water filters within the dam, but just due to some logistical maintenance issues that were ongoing with the dam in the last, I think, 3-4 years, that we're just kind of starting back up again. But that's a major research priority, immediate research priority at the moment.
Thank you. So I guess just in summary, we impacts are already being seen and felt. And as I'm sure you're aware, there's still a lot more to be done in terms of the pathway management, setting those iwi priorities and getting on with some of that science. And obviously also understanding what those longer term impacts on ecosystem function are, people, and the economic use of waters, which we are continuing to assess as we go and develop tools. And with that, I would just like to, I have a really large slide full of acknowledgements because there are a lot of people working on this project with us and collectively. So I just would like to recognise that. And if people have questions or would like more information, our webpage is at the bottom. So that provides access to a lot of the information that we've already developed. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hofstra and Marukera, for this fascinating and thought-provoking presentation. We'll now move into the question Q&A session. If you haven't already, please feel free to drop your questions into the Zoom chat or raise your hand, or you can also have some comments on the YouTube live, and I'll read them out loud or call you directly. But in the meantime, I do have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. It was a very interesting presentation. So, Dr. Hofstra, from your perspective in freshwater biosecurity and invasive species management, what do you see as the most immediate priority for responding to the presence of these species in New Zealand's waterways?
Thanks. That's a good question. I think the most immediate priority is the one where the focus has been. So the first thing is being able to contain the clams. So we know where they are already and we don't want them to get anywhere else. So the first thing is really focusing on containment, which is why for us there's been such a focus also working with those other agencies and coming up with decontamination protocols. So ways that we know that we can best keep our gear clean and reduce the risk of spread.
And in this idea of containment, how feasible are eradication programs for these species, and what are the potential challenges that can come with it, from social to the species itself?
Probably everything you can think of. So I guess it is super challenging. I guess one of the things, though, from my perspective, that is perhaps different about New Zealand and Australia as well, is because we're very different nations, but also island nations, and we have those big ocean borders, we do have a different sense of the way we want to protect our native species. And so I think with that comes a different public awareness about the need to have intervention tools and eradication tools as well. So I think just part of that greater public awareness also then enables more conversations to be had about what might be acceptable or good ways to manage species and what isn't. So we do want to do more than just monitor. We do want to, okay, great, we've monitored, we know where it is, now what can we do about it?
Great. Thank you so much for that. We have a question. So really interesting talk. Thank you both. Do you know yet how many months of the year they are reproducing?
Oh, that is such a good question, and actually a super, super relevant question, because just this last week, we saw the first signs of reproduction. So I guess if anyone looks to the literature, that'll talk about once the water temperature is over about 15 degrees, they might be reproductive. And certainly from the literature, there's examples of maybe being two kind of peak events, or maybe they just reproduce all summer. We don't actually know yet in a New Zealand context, but what we do know is we suspect they're reproducing throughout the summer, and we think they're starting now, as in this week. So the hot off the press information is that last week, for the first time, samples that were taken from the river came back with a few juveniles in them. And Medicata, I'm not sure if you remember, but being out at the lake with Karen the other day, and she was dissecting some samples. I think 3 of those clams had not quite fully formed, but they certainly were reproductive already. So it's very small numbers, but and the water temperature was, I think she said it was 14.9 degrees or something like that. So I think that, like, as I said, Sebastian, hot off the press information in terms of answering that question. It looks like the reproduction is starting now, and I would imagine it will continue on as those water temperatures rise.
Yeah, wow, it's very interesting.
It was interesting, but not good news.
Well, that's how science is. It's slowly but surely.
Absolutely, and we have been monitoring for it. We knew that timing was going to come around, and we were obviously monitoring for it, because actually having reproduction start to occur also means that some of the science that we want to do, we can start doing now that that's occurring in the river. So we wanted to make the most of that seasonal opportunity.
Yeah, and just to stall the idea that I'm having right now. So this is a question for both of you. So what lessons do you think this Corbicula case offers for preventing future freshwater invasions in this area or elsewhere, given that it's such a new identification and the whole process of identifying and studying it and then proposing management strategies. So what lessons do you think this offers for the future?
Medicata, do you want me to go first, or would you like to go
Yes.
first?
No, you go first.
I think it offers a lot of lessons. I think one of the interesting ones, and you can never really tell after the fact, but of course one of the questions that's still raised is how the clams actually got in the country in the first place, and there's several possibilities there, and whether or not that loophole or that in our biosecurity net, whether or not that can be closed off or tightened. So that's certainly one lesson to be learned. And I think Corbicula fluminea is not the worst thing that we could have in terms of invasive bivalves even in the rest of the world. New Zealand does not have zebra mussels or quagga mussels, nor do we want them. So I think all of the lessons that are learned from this response are really super meaningful to take into how we could respond faster and should something else get through that biosecurity border net and end up in the country.
Yeah, and I think going off that, I think one of the main lessons will be, so as Deb touched on, so the speed in which we'll be able to respond, but I also think the speed in which we will collaboratively be able to respond, because now that we have kind of those networks and the like with the technical group, I think it'll be a lot easier and as she said, faster to actually mobilize on that more widespread scale. So then, yeah, things are kind of put in quicker and yeah, on that national scale. So I think, yeah, really it's the we know who to work with or where to go. Yep. And so it's now just tapping in. We've got those networks. So, yeah, God forbid if, touch wood, nothing, another invasive species, but yeah.
It's a good point, but it's not good because that essentially says, yeah, we feel like we're more prepared now, but we don't want to be tested.
But what? Yeah, exactly.
Maricata, you mentioned earlier in the presentation about social science and well, no, you meant it's not that the right term. It's citizen science. What are the specific activities that are being done or are planned to do regarding how the people from the area will directly participate on providing information? You created this ID, or you both created this ID guide. What is this citizen science that you have already going or planning to do for active participation?
Yeah, I think it's especially for the people that are on the ground. It's yeah, kind of giving as many resources and tools as possible. So yeah, Deb and others have created like the field guides and being able to go out into the communities that know the areas that have seen it every day, and be able to give them the tools. I think it gives them the confidence and a bit of like ownership and pride in terms of like, well, this is our patch of land that obviously we want to look after. Now I have some tool, I'm equipped with some tools where I can play my part and help, and obviously, like as amazing as we have with all these institutes and organizations working on this, obviously, they've got finite employees that are also have multiple projects or things going on at the time, so things can easily be missed or take a bit longer. Whereas I think, yeah, as soon as you engage and really make that kind of like personal connection and really show, well, this is how it will impact you and your community, I think, yeah, that then it does. I think it just automatically makes people bit fired up or yeah, kind of, yeah, very like prideful and that take that ownership, which then of course, yeah, citizen science, and it all feeds in and helps yeah, helps the whole process really.
Yeah, get it. Okay, thank you for that. And this is our last question. How can we contact you through the web page or an email? What's the source of contact information that we can get from both of you for people if they have like other questions or want to
Yeah,
directly contact you?
my name is definitely on the web page, so that makes it very easy. I'm not sure that Medicutters is, but if I'm yeah, I can certainly, if people have questions specifically for Medicutter, I can certainly pass those on to her.
All right, thank you. Well, then thank you again to everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks to Dr. Deborah Hofstra and Merikara Warrington for sharing their insights of this emerging issue of Corbicula fluminea in New Zealand. This webinar was hosted by INVASIVSNET in partnership with the GuardIAS project as part of our shared effort to foster open knowledge, collaboration, and awareness of invasive species and aquatic biosecurity worldwide. Now, if you would like to keep informed for future webinars or other information, these are social media platforms, and you can follow us, and we will be posting a lot of information regarding the upcoming webinars and other very interesting information about biological invasions. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll be all then.
Thank you very much, and I really hope you do have a very well. I hope you can get some sleep now, and that you do have a very wonderful birthday.
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sebastian. I guess I'll see you next time when you're running somebody else's seminar.